Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we're slipping into a different kind of myth, when the Greek gods finally rest. No thunderclaps, no heroic clashes. Just Zeus banking the hearth, Hera tending a hush-filled garden, Athena sketching a dream map for your mind, Hephaestus letting the forge breathe, Apollo's lyre meeting Artemis's moonlit lullaby, Dionysus teaching kindness through a gently mixed cup, and Poseidon guiding you with a soft anchor across the night sea. This is Greek gods at rest, Zeus's peaceful night, a slow, luminous journey designed to loosen the knots in your day, steady your breath, and carry you toward easy sleep. You'll catch little threads of real history woven through the storytelling. East-facing temples greeting dawn, the measured grace of a crater-mixed wine, the moonlit columns of Sunion, each scene a quiet ritual to help your body settle and your thoughts arrange themselves into calm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. Before we begin, drop a comment with what time it is for you right now and where you're listening from, city and country. I love seeing this little map of the world appear, and I'll weave that gentle global rhythm into tonight's pace. If you're ready, take a slow breath in, soften your shoulders, and let's begin the night in Zeus's peaceful hands.
You stand at the edge of the clouds, where Mount Olympus touches the sky like a whisper etched into eternity. The first breeze of night brushes against your face, cool and gentle, carrying with it the resin of pine trees, the delicate fragrance of wild flowers, and the mineral breath of stones that have drunk the day's sunlight. Beneath you, the mortal world quiets. From the villages below, faint glimmers of fire scatter like fallen stars, small pockets of warmth against the widening fabric of the night. Above you, the heavens expand, not with thunder, not with power, but with a silence so vast you can almost hear the sky exhale. You are not alone here. There is a presence. Zeus sits upon his throne, not as the lord of thunder and judgment, but as a figure softened by night's veil. You expect the blaze of lightning, the roar of storms. Instead, you notice something humbler, the soft sound of fabric settling, a cloak resting on the stone armrest, the measured breath of a being who carries both the cosmos and its stillness within him. You move carefully, not wishing to disturb the fragile quiet. Every step you take on the marble floor feels like stepping across a narrow bridge between two realms, the realm of day's noise and the realm of night's refuge. Your heels touch the cold stone, yet it does not chill you. Instead, it steadies you, as if the mountain itself lends its calm. Zeus does not speak, but his silence speaks for him. It spreads outward like rings in still water, and within those rings you begin to hear the softer voices of existence, the faint jingling of goats in the valley below, the whisper of grasses rubbing together, the patient creak of a spider weaving her thread at the temple gate, and the endless murmur of a spring, trickling like a poem composed in water. Each droplet becomes a droplet of serenity. You sit upon the temple steps. The stone beneath you still holds the last warmth of the sun, like the memory of a day refusing to vanish completely. In front of you, the dome of the sky has unveiled its stars. Some bright and sharp, others dim and uncertain, but all of them arranged like lanterns guiding the path of dreams. You imagine walking along the Milky Way as if it were a simple country path, bending to scoop up a handful of starlight and scatter it through your hair. Behind you, Zeus breathes in rhythm with the night. His breath is not thunder, not command, but a steady tide that lulls every restless thought to sleep. He folds his thunderbolt away, as a craftsman might set down his hammer at the end of a long day. The thought makes you pause. Power is not always a blaze, not always a storm. Sometimes true power is the act of putting the storm away, of recognizing that rest is as sacred as command. The realization warms your chest like a hidden ember. You close your eyes. Olympus remains where it has always been, immovable, eternal. Yet tonight, the mountain feels as if it leans closer, inviting you to rest your forehead against its ancient body. You do so. The marble is cold, the mountain heart beats slow and steady, but the message is clear. Tonight, you are allowed the rare luxury of doing nothing. And when you do nothing, you discover that everything arranges itself without effort.
Zeus raises his hand, and you expect thunder to split the night sky. Yet instead of violence, you see something almost tender. The thunderbolt, his most feared weapon, softens. In the darkness, it is no longer a spear of fire, but a ribbon of pale light, glowing like silk held against the flame of a lantern. With deliberate care, Zeus wraps it around itself. The motion is unhurried, precise, like a father tying a ribbon around his child's toy to keep it safe. For the first time, you notice faint calluses along his fingers, the quiet evidence of a craftsman who has wielded storms too many times. The realization shakes you. Even the king of gods bears the marks of labor. You watch in silence. He places the folded thunderbolt into a small chest carved of cedar, worn smooth by centuries of touch. The chest breathes the resinous scent of pine and the sweet trace of cinnamon. Closing it, Zeus fastens a strip of leather across the lid. A ritual, you understand, not recorded in any scroll. A nightly offering to stillness itself. The act whispers, even power must learn when to rest. Your heart stirs. You think of your own clenched hands, the countless nights you've held on to worries, names, or judgments as if they were lightning themselves. Perhaps like Zeus, you too must fold them away. You imagine your anxieties as ribbons of light glowing in your palms. You breathe out, carefully, as if sealing them in your own chest, invisible but present. Relief seeps into your ribs like warm rain. Zeus glances at you, not as judge, not as stormbringer, but as a teacher measuring the progress of his pupil. His amber gaze carries neither scorn nor pity, only the gentle question, have you put away what needed putting away? You nod, feeling lighter, as though the air itself has agreed to carry part of your burden. His lips curve to the faintest acknowledgement, a rare kindness carved in the marble of his stern face. Beneath the temple steps, fields of barley shimmer silver under the moon. You hear them sigh with the wind, waves of grain colliding softly against the mountain's base. The sound lulls you further, as if Olympus itself exhaled through the stalks. Behind you, the cedar chest hums faintly with sleeping power.
The thunderbolt is not gone, merely resting. Tomorrow it may roar again, but tonight it teaches you that strength is not constant eruption. It is rhythm, day and night, tension and release, holding and folding. In ancient Greek belief, Zeus's thunderbolt was crafted by the Cyclopes, master smiths of divine weapons. It symbolized absolute authority, capable of shattering mountains and enforcing cosmic order. Tonight, you see the thunderbolt transformed, not as weapon, but as cloth of light, folded and stored in a cedar chest, a secret ritual of rest no myth has ever told.
With emotion almost playful, Zeus gathers a cluster of clouds in his palm. He presses them together, and a fire blossoms, not the blaze of war, but a flame of peace, glowing amber and steady. It breathes like a living thing, sending warmth across the marble floor. You inch closer, spreading your hands to the heat. The fire smells of comfort, honey melting, barley bread, and sprigs of rosemary drying in the sun. For the first time, Olympus feels less like a throne of power and more like a kitchen hearth, a place where even gods need rest. Zeus places a small kettle above the flame. Steam curls upward, and within it you glimpse shapes, fleets of ships crossing Aegean waters, oaths spoken in torchlight, songs sung in dusty marketplaces. But none of them clamor. They drift quietly, like shadows of stories too tired to shout. You sip from the cup he offers. The drink is nameless, but it tastes like memory softened into dream. A heavy cloak is laid beside you. You understand it as invitation. You lie down, your head resting upon a pillow of woven mist. From here, Zeus is less a king and more a silhouette carved by firelight. His nose a mountain ridge, his eyelids the slopes of night. You blink slowly, and each time your eyes close, another layer of silence reveals itself, a leaf trembling, the fire adjusting its seat, a stone rolling somewhere down the valley. You whisper your fear of tomorrow, the steep road, the questions, the eyes that weigh heavy as boulders. Zeus does not answer. Instead, he stirs the fire with his hand, feeding it with dry cloud until the warmth reaches you fully. You realize then, some fears do not need answers, only warmth enough to dissolve. You drift, not into a torrent, but into a quiet river where reeds sway. The sky pulls you gently, a string tied to your wrist, guiding you towards sleep. From the cedar chest, a faint spark flickers, an eyelid of lightning checking if you are safe. Zeus smiles, presses it closed. You smile too, in half-dream. Sleep comes like a bird finding the right branch. You draw the cloak higher, feeling your heart slow. In the final moment, before dreams claim you, you understand the lesson hidden in the night. True strength knows when to fold, and true peace begins with surrender. Greek temples often contained a central hearth dedicated to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Though absent from Olympus myths, fire was sacred for both gods and mortals, symbolizing home and continuity. Tonight, Zeus himself builds a hearth, not of stone, but of cloud, transforming Olympus into a kitchen of the sky, a hidden sanctuary where thunder sleeps. You leave Zeus's hearth behind and follow a fragrance that drifts through the night air. It is not the sharpness of thunder or the resin of pine, but something softer, richer, like seeds bursting with sweetness. You walk slowly, and soon a grove reveals itself. The branches are heavy with pomegranates, their red skins glowing faintly in the moonlight, as though the fruit itself had captured pieces of dusk and hidden them inside. The path between the trees is lined with laurel leaves. They crunch lightly beneath your feet, releasing a scent of green bitterness, the kind of fragrance that awakens rather than lulls. Yet here within this garden, even that sharpness bends into calm. Every step seems to stitch you deeper into the fabric of quiet. At the center of the grove, she waits. Hera, queen of the gods, yet nothing about her posture tonight demands bowing. She sits upon a simple stone bench, her cloak flowing around her like water pooling at the base of a fountain. Beside her, a peacock rests, its tail folded, the eyes upon its feathers half closed in drowsy glitter. Hera's hands move in a rhythm, not weaving, not braiding, but sewing, threading air itself into unseen seams. You hesitate, and she lifts her gaze. There is authority, yes, but softened by the stillness of night. You feel as though she sees not your face, but the loose threads trailing from your chest, every worry frayed, every bond torn. She gestures to the seat beside her. When you sit, she does not speak. Instead, she offers you a needle made of silver light. You do not know how to use it, but your fingers curl around it as if they always belonged to this craft. Hera guides your hand to the air before you, and suddenly you see the rents, tears in the fabric of your own heart, the small wounds of promises unmet, of moments left incomplete. Together you begin to stitch. The thread hums faintly, each pull drawing edges closer, each knot a quiet vow. You recall how mortals once built great temples for Hera in Argos and Samos, raising columns to honor the sanctity of marriage and family. Yet here, under the moon, you learn another truth. Her temple is not only stone and altar, it is the unseen garden where she keeps watch over every fragile thread of love. By the time you finish your first seam, the fruit above glows brighter, and you realize they are not lanterns, but guardians, pomegranates swelling with countless breaths once lost in sighs. Hera does not explain. She does not need to. The garden tells you. No sigh is wasted. Here, each one ripens into sweetness.
Hera leads you deeper into the garden, where the moon pools in quiet basins of light, and the peacock drowses like a jeweled sentinel. You notice a low pavilion ahead, supported by columns that look less carved than grown, as if stone had learned the patience of trees. The doorway is narrow and framed with bands of bronze that have darkened into a mellow green. Hera stops, her hand hovering just above the handle, not touching, simply acknowledging the presence of what lies within. "You will not open this," she says. And yet there is no command in her voice, only a kindness that needs no explanation. You will only listen. Inside, the pavilion is dim. Your eyes learn the darkness slowly, like students tracing letters for the first time. At the center stands a wooden cabinet, no higher than your shoulder. Its surface is smooth, its corners rounded with time, and its doors are inlaid with tiny whorls of mother-of-pearl that glimmer like trapped dawns. When the night breeze presses in, the cabinet sighs, a sound so soft you could mistake it for your own breath letting go. Hera rests her fingers on the lid. "Mortals come to my temples," she says, and the words feel older than the walls. They tie ribbons and leave garlands. They speak promises they hope will hold. But some nights are long, some bonds fray. In Argos, in Samos, in cities where laurel breaks the sunlight, they send me what they cannot carry, the breath that weighs them down. And then you understand. The cabinet has no locks because what it keeps cannot be stolen. It houses sighs, those small exhalations mortals release when no one is looking, the little storms that never find thunder. Within this box, sighs are kept not as burdens, but as seeds. Hera opens nothing. She only listens. In that listening, the cabinet becomes a field. You hear faint rustlings, a timber like grain heads touching. Every sigh has a shape, a color you cannot name, a temperature that cools your forehead. The ones born of anger are light and brief, like sparks that refuse to catch. The ones born of grief are heavy and smooth, pebbles pulled from a riverbed. Some sighs are shy. They barely sound at all. Others carry the aftertaste of pomegranate, tart and steady, as though resolve itself had learned to breathe. The peacock lifts its head. In its tail, dozens of eyes blink, slow, unhurried, not watching you, but remembering for you. Somewhere in a story you've half forgotten, there is a guardian named Argus, whose 100 eyes were set into a peacock's train so that nothing precious would ever be left unattended again. You do not speak the tale aloud. The garden speaks it for you. Hera turns to you. "She brought something," she says simply. And you know she does not mean an offering you can hold in your hands. You close your eyes and find it. The long ache at the base of your ribs, the sentence you never finished, the name you still weigh on your tongue. When you breathe out, the pavilion gathers it, not to erase it, but to give it a place to ripen. No ceremony follows. There is only the hush after a truth finally finds a chair. Hera draws the air as a seamstress draws thread, and the night tightens around the cabinet with a fit that feels exact. In distant sanctuaries, columns catch the moon. Tall at Argos, sea-washed at Samos. You remember hearing how brides once walked under laurel, pomegranate in hand, a fruit whose red chambers whispered of life's multiply folded sweetness. The fact floats into the room as lightly as dust, landing on the cabinet like a blessing. Hera says, "Return tomorrow, if you must. Your sigh will still be here. It will not be as heavy." The promise is not magic, it is patience. And in this garden, patience is the oldest god of all. You leave the pavilion without turning your back on it, carrying the rare sensation of being carried. The path to the bench seems shorter, the wind warmer, the night a shade more forgiving. Somewhere behind you, a cabinet full of sighs continues to breathe, quietly, faithfully, until each one remembers how to become fruit.
Back at the stone bench, Hera gathers 2 narrow ribbons from the fold of her cloak, one white as milk, one red as ripened pomegranate. She places them across your open palms, their textures different. The white, cool and smooth. The red with a grain that catches slightly on your skin, like a whisper asking to be heard twice. Vows are not kept by words alone, she says, sitting beside you so that the night can sit on her other side. They are kept by places, by gestures, by the way breath leaves the mouth when the heart is steady. She teaches you a knot, simple, almost playful. Your fingers learn it first, your mind later. The ribbon loops, crosses, returns and tightens with a modest click. It is a small domestic miracle, a structure that holds without hurting. In that moment, an old world opens. You see girls in soft sandals running a race at Olympia, their hair bound and their tunics striped. A quiet festival honoring a goddess who guards the thresholds of union. In another vision, a bride stands beneath laurel, her veil lifted with a tenderness that feels like dawn. No one says the names of ceremonies. The garden remembers them in muscle and thread. Hera places the knot on your wrist, not to bind you to another, but to loosen you from what you were never meant to carry alone. The white breathes like a calm sea. The red keeps time with your pulse. When you close your fist, the knot gives slightly and then settles as if it understands that keeping is a living activity, not a rigid command. You do not promise never to falter, Hera says, and a breeze moves through the laurel as if agreeing. You promise to return. Return to what? To the bench, to the cabinet, to the path of pomegranates, to the gentle work of stitching what tears, to the patient god called time. In your chest, something that once fluttered now perches. The peacock shifts closer, tail still folded, a constellation waiting to be evening. In its feathers, the eyes do not pry. They keep watch. A remembrance travels through the garden, the story of a guardian with many eyes whose long vigil was given shape so that your short nights would not feel unguarded. You find comfort in knowing that somewhere, beyond naming and beyond decrees, a watchfulness persists. Hera stands. She lifts your knotted wrist and brings it level with the moon. The red glows rust. The white becomes a path of milk. If it loosens, tighten it with breath, not with force. If it tightens, slacken it with kindness. The instruction is so gentle, you wonder how it can possibly hold.
And then you realize that is the point. What is held with gentleness chooses to stay. A soft chime rises from the cabinet in the pavilion, perhaps a sigh finding its sweeter shape. The garden answers with a fragrance of rosemary and loam. Hera smiles, and the garden doors, a dozen you had not noticed, open in your mind at once. Argos with its broad courts, Samos with its sea-lighted stones, unnamed villages where doorways are decorated with laurel sprigs because someone remembered that beginnings need guardians. Go, Hera tells you, but the word does not send you away. It releases you forward, the way a knot releases slack to allow the cloth to move. You retrace the path through the pomegranates. Their skins have darkened, the way skies do before dawn. When you pass the bench where you learn to sow the air, you touch it lightly, not out of superstition, but gratitude. At the garden gate, the knight lifts your ribboned wrist and bows to it without bowing, an etiquette only the quiet understand. You step back onto the broader mountain and feel Zeus's warmth waiting somewhere beyond. You do not hurry. The knot teaches you to walk at the pace of keeping, and the keeping tonight feels effortless.
You follow a pale thread of moonlight along the mountain's flank until it turns into a corridor, and the corridor breathes into a hall. It is not large, yet space feels multiplied by quiet. An owl perches upon a beam, the kind that looks through you rather than at you. You remember that nights belong to such eyes. A soft lamp waits on a stone table. The flame doesn't flicker, it studies. She is here. Athena does not announce herself. She is the arrival that happens when your pulse agrees to slow. Her helm rests on the table, not worn, and the aegis with its coiled edge lies folded like a shawl that has learned politeness. You sit because the room teaches you to sit. You listen because the silence begins to speak. Athena lifts a slender stylus that glints, then dims, an instrument of nothing or of air. She places it in your hand. Write what keeps you wakeful, she says, not with sound, but with exactness. You lower the stylus to the empty space above the table, and something invisible becomes a surface. Lines appear only as you breathe, pale as milk on glass. The first words are tangled. What if? Why then? If only. Your hand trembles, Athena's finger dips to your wrist, and the tremor finds a shore. Strategy begins where panic leaves. The room thinks for her. You exhale, and the letters soften. The owl lifts one foot, closes it again. A punctuation, not a warning. You write your unquiet city, duties leaning against one another at the wrong angles, a complaint you carried too far, a gate you forgot to close. As you write, paths open between the words, alleys of resolution and squares of rest. Streets curl into a plan that seems to know your feet. The lamp brightens, then remembers itself and calms. A breeze travels across the table with the scent of crushed olive leaves, bitter and clean.
You have heard a story of a city that chose an olive tree over a salt spring, and how the gift became an answer that outlived its asker. That story lives here without needing to be retold. The stone under your palm holds a coolness that must have touched many foreheads, petitioners, builders, the kind of people who solve by staying. Athena tilts the stylus. The line you draw becomes narrower, then wide again, the width governed by breath, not will. You discover that thinking is a muscle, but clarity is a climate. When you pause, the room grants you weather, a hush like calm seas off Piraeus, a faint echo like footsteps in the Parthenon when the custodians have gone. Somewhere, a lyre practices scales for discipline, not for performance. Do not map toward victory, the lamp seems to say. Map toward sleep. The words rearrange of their own accord. What must be done tomorrow settles near the lamp. What must be let go drifts to the edge like boats released from a harbor they were never built to enter. What must be postponed tucks itself beneath the stylus and promises to be smaller by morning. You dare to add a wish you have not admitted. Quiet prosperity, not the kind that shouts from marble, but the kind that grows like a courtyard olive that needs time and pruning. The stylus does not scratch, it consents. The owl lowers its lids halfway, a benediction. Athena removes your hand from the air. The letters remain, but fainter than before, as if each thought had been weighed and given a seat proportionate to its weight. At dawn, her eyes tell you only the necessary lines will still be visible, a gift both stern and gentle. The map edits itself while you sleep. You wrap your fingers around the stylus and feel nothing, and in that nothing, the first mercy of the night.
The lamp burns lower, thickening the room into a refuge. Athena slides the helm farther away, as if to declare that nothing sharp will be needed. She places a small lamp of clay beside the first. Its handle is shaped like a leaf, and the oil inside smells of hillside and noon. She lights it from the studying flame, and the two marry into one patient brightness. Make terms, she suggests without speaking, not with the world, but with yourself. You didn't know that treaties could be inward. She sets a shallow tray of sand between you. When her finger draws a line, the sand accepts it with a sound like a sleepless shore. You draw a line facing hers, cautious. The lines do not fight, they learn the distance that permits each to breathe. You have heard that in a certain city, a sacred olive grew where a goddess's gift once touched the earth, and that even when fires came, a green shoot returned. The lamp seems to remember this. Each time your breath steadies, the flame lowers its shoulders, as if to say, resilience does not arrive with noise. You name the first term, to wake without rehearsing yesterday's trial. You smooth the sand and write it again, shorter, then shorter still, until it becomes an outline that fits your chest. The second term, to do one thing fully before beginning the next. The third, to forgive yourself by doing something gentler than forgiveness, by noticing. Athena does not nod. She lets the sand approve. The owl glides down, silent as a decision carefully kept, It leaves no mark, only a brief pressure of presence that affirms the room. You draw a small square in the sand and place your name in it, not as signature, but as shelter. The square means, "Here I return when the day forgets me." Athena's hand passes above the tray. Roads form between your terms, and a little grove appears where they meet, the place of pause. Stand there often, the air advises. You imagine yourself stopping at that grove at noon, at dusk, each time the mind sprints ahead without shoes. Somewhere beyond the walls, a city lifts. You feel colonnades and stoas, streets where debate loves its own echo. Yet inside this hall, conversation has learned to be a vow. The oil in the lamp moves like calm water in a shallow bowl. You could sleep to it. You press a fingertip to the sand and write one final clause, the kind that makes the others possible. To accept the pace of olive growth. Immediate relief wears a pleasant mask. You choose the slow face that stays. The clause feels like a key set down and trusted to be there tomorrow. Athena gathers the edges of the tray and lays a palm beneath it. The sand holds. If you turn it in the night, the lamp almost smiles, the lines will rearrange themselves into the same meaning. You do not ask how such a promise can be kept. The owl turns its head, and the answer looks like patience wearing feathers. The treaty is not signed, it is inhaled. Your chest rises, falls. The lamp leans with you, custodial. The helm on the table has not moved, but it looks smaller, as if power, properly set aside, returns proportion to the world.
Athena rises, and the room breathes taller. She gathers the aegis into a tighter fold, the serpentine edge asleep, and lifts the helm only to move it a little farther from the lamp. Thinking, the gesture says, does not require armor when the night keeps watch. She leads you to an alcove where the wall has learned to be a slate. You expect inscriptions, but there are none. Instead, faint marks appear and vanish like fish in a clear stream. They are not commandments, they are timings. The owl lands above the alcove and begins to beat its wings, slow, then still, then slow again. The air organizes around the rhythm. In that pulse, you learn a truth you once rushed past. Decisions are not only choices, they are moments. Athena places your palm against the wall. Warmth blooms, your own, and the marks steady. Choose when your mind is widest, the warmth implies, and let the narrow hours keep your promises, not make them. You think of mornings when the world barges in, of afternoons that push, of nights that pull. Somewhere between the push and pull, there is a plank of quiet. She points to it without pointing. The helm shines very little here. Its bronze is honest. You see dents you had not noticed. Days it was used, nights it was not. A tenderness enters your throat. You have demanded too much of your helm, of your face. The alcove forgives you without ceremony. From the ceiling, a drop of oil falls and does not stain. Athena's palm was quicker than gravity. She smears the tiny brightness along the edge of the helm. Not for battle, the motion hums, for smoothness. Things slide easier when cared for. Even burdens accept their bearers when the bearing is kind. She returns the helm to the table and sets a small stone beside it, veined and ordinary. Wait and witness, her eyes translate. When tomorrow arrives, the helm will be heavier by the stone's honesty. and lighter by the owl's timing. You try to hold both in your chest and discover there is room. The lamp thins. Dawn has begun to think about its entrance. Your map on the air has dimmed to a few lines, the necessary ones. The treaty in the sand is a garden no night wind has disturbed. You feel taller without stretching, steadier without bracing. Athena walks you to the threshold. The owl has become the shape of shadow. Olive fragrance follows you like a bookmark between pages you are willing to reread. At the doorway, she touches the space above your heart, not touch, but permission. The permission feels like this. You may be exact without being hard. You may be soft without letting go of the form. You look back once. The helm is ordinary the way bread is ordinary, and you love it more for that. The aegis sleeps without eyes, the lamp watches without worry, and the hall, which seemed small, contains all the room you will need. The mountain takes you back by the path you remember, now shorter, as if clarity has folded distance. Somewhere above, a map edits itself to mercy. Somewhere within, a treaty keeps breathing. You descend along a corridor of cooled basalt, your fingers grazing a wall that remembers fire. The air is warm but unthreatening, the way a kiln holds yesterday's heat. Ahead, you hear a bellows breathe, long, contented exhales that belong less to a machine than to an animal falling asleep. A doorway opens onto a forge that looks like a harbor, anvils like anchored boats, tongs upright like masts, hammers laid to one side as oars after a safe landing. Hephaestus notices you without lifting his head. He is seated on a low stool, turning a piece of iron the color of dark cherries in a bed of ash that glows like embers remembering their youth. His leg moves with a rhythm that favors one side, a limp that your eyes register and then accept because his movements convert asymmetry into a kind of music. Around the forge, attendants shaped of shining metal move with patient precision, golden hands passing a ladle, bronze shoulders adjusting the bellows so deftly that you forget you are watching tools the way others watch dancers. He gestures for you to come nearer. The bellows sigh once more, then quiet. Not every fire wants to be urged, his look implies. He sets the iron aside and slides the ash over it with the tenderness of tucking in a child. You sit, your knees almost touching a bucket that smells faintly of olives and river stone. You've come with a door that squeaks, the room says for him. You understand at once. He means the hinge between your waking and your sleep. Hephaestus lifts a thin strip of copper and a fragment of leather, places them on a small anvil the size of a book. With two measured taps, tap, tap, he forges a hinge so small it could fasten a moth's wing to a midnight. He cools it in oil, and the scent rises, clean, green, forgiving. While he works, the forge tells its stories without boasting. Once thunder was shaped here for a brother with a sky to keep. Once a shield held a city and an ocean and a dance for a hero who would need both beauty and doom. Once tripods learned to roll of their own accord so that labor might greet the gods at their tables without waiting to be called. These are things that happened, and yet the room refuses to be loud about them. The quiet is not modesty, it is mastery. Hephaestus opens his palm, and the hinge gleams like a new moon. He nods toward you. You close your eyes. He does not touch your forehead. He simply holds the hinge near the space where thought and breath meet, and you feel it slot into place as if it had been missing since childhood. Your jaw loosens, the muscles at the back of your neck release. A click inside your skull that no one else could hear announces a realignment. Along one wall, a fissure breathes warm air from deep within the mountain. You think of islands whose hearts burn quietly under the sea, of workshops hidden beneath peaks that smoke when the world above grows cold. In a distant tale, someone said the smith's home was under a mountain that coughs fire, and from that fire came tools that stitched order into chaos. The tale is not recited here. The heat makes itself evident. Try the door, the ash suggests. You lean back in your mind and push. The door between your day and your night no longer complains. It swings true, balanced, unafraid of its own weight. Hephaestus smiles in a way that changes nothing about his face and everything about the room. The golden attendants tidy nothing because nothing is out of place. The bellows, like a sleeping ox, shifts once and settles. You thank him without speaking. Hephaestus nods once, and your ribs answer with space you didn't know you were missing. The forge seems smaller now that it fits you better. When you rise, he turns the ash again over the quiet iron. Let it rest, his hands say, and the lesson lands where all true lessons land, not in your ears, but in your bones.
Hephaestus sets a shallow crucible on the workbench and sifts a handful of charcoal into it, choosing pieces by sound rather than sight. The golden attendants withdraw to the edges like respectful witnesses. He leans close, not to blow, but to listen. Fire speaks in colors, the crucible confides. Time too. He takes a rod of soft iron and draws a circle in the ash. No grand compass, just the certainty of a hand that has learned straightness from patience. In the center, he places 3 embers, one the color of cinnamon, one like a garnet held to lamplight, one a small sun, willfully remembering itself. He arranges them in a spiral, so slow that your breath lengthens to keep pace. There are clocks that tick, the anvil seems to murmur, and clocks that glow. Hephaestus points to the palest ember. Begin here, his eyes say. While you read yourself to sleep, keep watch with this color. The ember answers by lowering to a quiet orange, the way a harp string settles after a pluck. He points to the second. Here is the depth where dreams sharpen rather than cut. The garnet ember hums with a heat that feels like covered coals in a hearth you trust. He touches the third with the tip of the rod and lifts it a finger's width, as though to remind it of sky. Here is the place where the body forgets the weight of its own armor. You have heard elsewhere that he once raised armor from fire for a warriors whose story would be sung and wept, and that the armor showed not only battles, but vineyards, dances, rivers, and a city at peace. The ember that remembers the body's weight brightens at that thought, as if acknowledging that rest, too, deserves depiction. Hephaestus nudges a clay bellows with his foot, not to force air, but to exhale in sympathy. The bellows breathes when you do. The embers answer by shading their light to the rhythm of your chest. Pale, deeper, deep. A quiet trinity of hours opens, first hour for drifting,
second hour for mending, third hour for forgetting to hold. The forge does not demand you count, it invites you to trust. On a shelf, you notice a pair of small wheels, filigreed with ivy. They look like the kind that once rolled beneath tripods that visited feasts on their own. Nearby, a set of delicate tongs shaped like fingers seems capable of picking up a raindrop without breaking it. This is a place where labor is intimate with grace. The ember clock needs no casing. Hephaestus places the crucible in your hands. It is warm and surprisingly light. When the first color fades, the warmth tells you, let the book close itself. You imagine the cover lowering as if a breeze had decided to do it for you. When the second softens, promise nothing, decide nothing. You allow the notion to sit on your tongue without dissolving. When the third remembers itself, the warmth smiles, let the body sleep. You look up. Hephaestus's face is lit from below, a sunset lodged in his beard. He says nothing about how long or how well. He says nothing about success. The forge has no appetite for verdicts, only for continuities. You hold the crucible against your sternum. The heat climbs into your bones and slows their language. For a moment, you think you hear hammers far away tapping out a lullaby, as though the world's making has agreed to pass through a quieter hour. The embers dim by half, then by a kindness you would call faith if fire could have a doctrine. When you finally set the crucible down, you do not feel you have put it away. You feel it has put you away, gently on a shelf labeled with your name and tonight's date, to be taken up by mourning hands that will find you whole.
Hephaestus lifts a hammer whose head is polished by centuries of correction. It is not heavy, it is exact. He brings you to an anvil with a face so smooth you can see the forge's ceiling traveling across it like a muted river. We remove burrs, the anvil thinks to you, not edges. He places a strip of your day, yes, your day, upon the anvil. It looks like metal, but you know it is the hard bar of your most recent worry, the words that grew barbs when spoken, the plan that acquired corners sharp enough to snag your sleep. He positions the strip at a slight angle and waits. The waiting is part of the craft. When the room leans towards stillness, he taps, not to flatten, but to round. The barb surrenders with a sound like a pin dropped on velvet. You remember a rumor told in laughter and in awe that once a net of filigreed strength caught two gods mid-embrace, proving that even in heaven craft could outwit force. Hephaestus's eyes hold no mockery. They hold the dangerous mercy of making, to reveal what is hard without humiliating it. He lifts the strip again, finds the other barbs hiding where you had thought yourself smooth, and persuades them into kindness. In a corner sits a stool with a dent shaped to a particular body. You understand that many nights ended here with a back eased, a breath reclaimed. The attendants pour a trickle of oil over the anvil, and the reflection turns from river to sheet of rain. Hephaestus sets the hammer down and opens a drawer you hadn't seen. Inside, pebbles, each with a line scored across it. He picks one up, and places it on the table near the helm from Athena's hall in your memory. Keep this, the gesture says. It weighs as much as a true decision and as little as pride. Above you, the ceiling darkens to the blue that precedes morning. The ember clock keeps its quiet watch somewhere behind your ribs. Hephaestus circles the forge once, like a final inspection before furling sails. At the quenching trough, he lifts water in his palm and lets it fall back in a silver rope. Cool, the sound advises, before you carry. He returns to you with a final gift. It looks like a rivet no larger than a lentil, warm as a word said rightly. Where does it belong, you wonder? And your sternum answers by opening a space beneath the place the hinge settled earlier. He holds the rivet near, and a seam in you, one you had ignored for months, accepts the fastener with gratitude disguised as relief. Nothing dramatic, simply a joining that will not rattle when the road is rough. From beyond the doorway, a faint laughter rises, like cups meeting in a workshop where joy is permitted after long work. Somewhere, wine once persuaded a stubborn heart to come home to the feast. The forge remembers without needing to rehearse. It keeps its stories the way it keeps its tools, ready, restrained, faithful. Hephaestus walks you to the threshold. He smells of iron that has been forgiven and of wood that has chosen not to smoke. You think of islands, of volcanoes, of cities built by hands that learned from hammers how to be both firm and merciful. The limp in his gait seems less a flaw than a signature that reads, "Nothing perfect lasts, nothing honest needs to." Outside, the mountain air tastes of cool stone. The hinge in your mind swings once, quietly. The ember colors recall their stations. The gentle hammer's lesson remains, not in your ears, but in the ease with which your shoulders forget to brace. You turn to thank him and realize he is already seated, turning the ash again with that small tenderness strong men sometimes hide. Go, the forge breathes, and the word sounds like sleep agreeing to hold you. You walk toward a terrace of pale stone where the mountain gives way to a view of water. The night has washed the edges of everything until only essentials remain. Sky, sea, the curve of a shore you cannot reach. A figure sits at the terrace's rim, sunlight remembered in his hair even though no sun is present. Apollo holds a lyre that seems older than any one song, the kind of instrument that learned patience from silence before it learned music from hands. He does not greet you. He invites you the way a horizon invites a traveler, by being there. You sit at a careful distance. The air smells faintly of bay leaves and something mineral, as if a spring flowed nearby. In the amphora at his side lies a sprig of laurel. You do not need the story to be told to feel the vow living in the leaf. Apollo turns the lyre toward the moon, and the strings take light like water takes stars. He begins not with notes, but with a listening that straightens your spine. The first string is bright enough to sweep dust from thought. The second is lower, and your ribs learn to loosen. The third and fourth move like the Aegean under small winds,
patterned, reliable. The fifth surprises you with a tenderness that finds the back of your neck and warms it. The sixth is almost not a sound at all, more like a permission. The seventh waits. Apollo's fingers hover over it without touching. He looks at you the way a healer looks at a pulse, not to judge, to learn. Some strings refuse to sound when the listener keeps a ledger, the lyre seems to say. You don't know how you know, but you know. The ledger is the one you keep against yourself, the book of minor wrongs you reread each night. You close it without ceremony and place it beside you on the stone. Apollo touches the seventh. It does not sing. He does not press harder. He looks again, not at your face, but at the place where your breath stalls. You exhale. The seventh string yields a single, almost impossible tone, a thread of gold stretched so thin it becomes air again. The sound slides into your chest as if seeking a chair long promised. It feels like learning that forgiveness and accuracy are not enemies. The terrace changes with the tone. You hear steps on unseen marble, a tripod settling to 3 quiet points, the murmur of a place that once held a question and then the answer. Delphi lives here without appearing. The laurel in the amphora is enough. Somewhere a priestess learns to separate voices from the wind. The lyre does not interrupt, it keeps time for visions older than sleep. Apollo moves his hand and your map of the day reorganizes. The hard parts soften at their corners. A difficult conversation rewinds in your memory and the words re-enter your mouth with less metal. The seventh string hums again, a little steadier, as if the instrument were agreeing not only to be heard, but to be believed. You notice then that Apollo's posture contains both grace and something quieter than strength, consistency. He does not rush the strings, he waits for the night to consent to each note. You have the sense that on an island not far from here, an altar once stood where a mother gave birth to twins beneath the palm, and the sea learned the shape of lullabies. Delos drifts into the room like an old friend who knows not to speak too loudly. When the song turns toward its end, Apollo places the laurel upon the lyre's neck. Keep nothing sharp near sleep, the act advises. He looks once more at the seventh string, then at you, then at the moon. The silence after is not empty, it is ripe.
The path bends away from stone into a corridor of trees. Their trunks hold moonlight the way old cups hold the sheen of former wine. A silver dog passes without sound, followed by another. Artemis arrives as a change in temperature, cooler, exact, kind. She does not carry a torch. The forest is her lantern. A quiver rests at her shoulder, but the arrows sleep with their eyes closed. She hands you a ribbon no wider than a blade of grass. For the wind, the night translates. You feel foolish for a moment. Who nuts air? Artemis answers the question you did not ask by choosing a branch at shoulder height and tying the ribbon around it with 3 movements: cross, loop, breathe. The ribbon tightens, and a breeze that wanted to wander now understands its task. It strokes instead of shoves. You walk together under a ceiling of leaves that edits the stars into a pattern you can keep. The dogs range and return, Carrying the map of the undergrowth in their paws, Artemisia grows along the path, its clean bitterness promising a body that remembers itself. Owls call from the left, then from nowhere. Artemis glances once. The forest reports that all is well. You have heard that she loves the hunt, and it is true. But tonight she hunts a different quarry. The stray thought that shakes the tent of sleep, the fear that leaps when the branches are only wind. For each she has a knot. Some are simple, the kind sailors use when a rope must endure. Some are decorative and strong, the way a crown can be both symbol and structure. She shows you the ones meant for dreams, a loop that keeps returning nightmares at the courtesy door, a hitch that lets the mind hold the moonbeam without trying to own it. At a clearing, she stops. The ground is soft with needles. Set your camp, the pause suggests. You realize your camp is the space between the last heartbeat you remember and the first one you're willing to forget. Artemis kneels and smooths a circle, then places a stone at its northern edge. Direction, the stone says, not destination. You lay your head where the circle says, yes. She moves around the clearing, securing what is not there. A flap that will not slap, a cord that will not tangle, a fear that will wait outside like weather with manners. When she lifts her eyes, the crescent above seems to rest in them. Moonlight chooses your face and becomes gentle. In the distance, a river keeps an old promise to run toward morning. Artemis unties the first ribbon she knotted at the branch. The breeze resumes its freedom, but something in it has learned courtesy. She hands you the ribbon, now faintly warm from wood and air. If wind returns as worry, the ribbon remembers. Borrow a branch. You think of girls racing in a different grove, robes hitched, feet bare, a festival that honored not matrimony this time, but the art of moving true. You think of a goddess who asked for room, forests for her hounds, nights for her quiet, vows that left her unowned. The forest carries these truths without making announcements. It holds them like water holds reflections, faithfully, without keeping. When you rise, Artemis smiles the kind of smile that has no teeth in it. The gods bow to sleep as if it were a sovereign who prefers not to be recognized. You carry the wind ribbon wound around your wrist. It does not bind, it trains the air.
You find yourself at a border where forest meets terrace again, where moonlight and sea breath negotiate a calm. Apollo is already there, tuning silence with his fingers. Artemis arrives on the path you just left, brushing a burr from a hound's ear. They do not embrace, they align, the way two sides of a doorway align so passage can be simple. Apollo begins with a scale that climbs like steps no one has to count. Artemis answers with a nod that adjusts the wind. The dogs settle in a ring. The owl chooses a branch with the gravity of a priest choosing a word. Between them, you realize, lies the art of keeping worlds. Day that does not bully night. Night that does not hide from dawn. The lyre plays a pattern you half remember from elsewhere, a melody that says the same thing in different seasons. You catch glimpses, a child on Delos learning to walk while the sea claps slowly, laurels whispered into wreaths without need for trumpets, a woman at Delphi breathing in, then out, until the answer chooses its shape. Apollo does not raise the volume, he refines it.
Artemis moves once across the clearing, tying a final knot that no one sees, and the crickets choose a tempo that respects walking hearts. She loosens a ribbon at the western edge, and a fear evaporates with the tact of mist entering trees. If Apollo offers form, Artemis offers space. If Apollo gives measure, Artemis grants margin. Together they write the page you will sleep upon. The seventh string returns. You did not know you were waiting for it. Apollo touches it only after you forget to expect it. The sound is tender authority, the rare combination that children trust before they understand. It tells your bones, lie down. It tells your tasks, wait outside. It tells the past, you have already taken your share. Artemis kneels and places 2 fingers lightly at your temple, where the mind flickers with leftover lightning. Later, the touch says, and the lightning learns manners. Behind your eyes, images reshelf themselves in a library with better lamps. Some pages will be there in the morning, but not all. The unnecessary volumes will find their way to the cabinet you left with Hera. The stubborn ones will be the work of the forge. The night, it turns out, is a team. Apollo leans the laurel against the lyre again. The moon lowers herself by a finger's width. The sea puts a hand on its own shoulder and remembers to breathe less loudly. The terrace welcomes the forest. The forest lends the terrace its nonchalance. You are inside a house with 2 doors open and no drafts. Now says nothing and everything. The 7th string quiets to a glow you can lie under. Artemis's dogs breathe in commas, not periods. The owl writes the line break. Your chest picks a speed that suits being alive without ambition. In this shared hush, history behaves as a lullaby. Twins born on a floating island that learn to be still. A sanctuary where questions were asked in poems and answered in patience. A hunt that chose not to kill because the quarry turned out to be fear. Myths that used to stand on pedestals sit down on the edge of your bed and hum. When the last note finishes finishing, Apollo lets his hand fall open. Artemis removes the ribbon from your wrist and ties it to the night instead. It knows how, her eyes say, and you believe her, because wind has been polite for some time. Sleep approaches like a boat guided by 2 lanterns, one golden, one silver. They do not compete. They agree about the shore. And the shore, generous tonight, meets you halfway.
You come upon a courtyard, lit by a patient fire, not the kind that commands, but the kind that companions. The night is cooler here, softened by ivy that climbs the columns and spills like dark water over the stone. A wide-bellied bowl waits upon a low table, clay breathing out the day it learned to hold. You know its name without having learned it, a crater, the vessel meant not for drinking, but for making the wine right. He is already seated, bare feet on the flagstones, a wreath of vine resting askew in his hair. Dionysus looks at you with eyes that have seen both revel and return. He does not speak of ecstasy or frenzy. He gestures to the crater, to a jug of spring water, to a jar of wine the color of garnet under lantern light. Not to forget, the motion says, but to remember gently. He pours first the water.
The sound is a small river returning to its bed. Then the wine, which does not roar but mingles as if happy to find its temper. You have heard elsewhere that at the symposia men once mixed their wine, 2 parts this, 3 parts that, because undiluted wine belonged to madness, and community learned itself through measure. Here, measure is not scolding, it is kindness. The ladle he offers you carries a modest portion, the size truth prefers. You lift the cup. The first sip is mostly coolness, then a warmth that doesn't rush, a patient blooming behind the sternum. It undoes the knot at the back of your throat the way a skilled hand undoes a ribbon, slowly, with respect for the knot's history. Around you, the courtyard arranges itself into a circle of ease. Satyrs are not rioting, they are drowsing. Maenads are not rending, they are humming, as if the song has found its home in their chests instead of tearing through them. Dionysus reaches for a staff topped with a pine cone, thyrsus, you think, and sets it down beside the crater as if it were a walking stick after a long and honest road. He chooses a grape and tucks it into your palm like a small certainty. Drink, the grape implies, not to outshout the day, but to let it finish its sentence. As you sip, the night performs a soft alchemy. Worries do not vanish, they dilute. Each becomes something you can name without flinching. The hardest name softens its consonants. The cup teaches proportion the way the sea teaches boats their size. You remember that in Athens, beneath a steep hill crowned with columns, people once sat shoulder to shoulder and watched stories learn to walk, tragedies and comedies born from songs that praised this god. But tonight, the god prefers a smaller stage, your breathing, your pulse choosing a calmer meter. Dionysus hums a melody you do not recognize, and yet have known. It is the tune of places where vines climb old houses, and the afternoon forgives your work for being only human. He adds a little water and waits. The patience is the point. You notice, with a relief that feels like sleep, that generosity can have edges, the edge that keeps you from spilling, the edge that keeps the night from becoming a wall instead of a room. You refill once, less than before. The second sip says, enough. The crater keeps its counsel, the wine its humility. Ivy shadows crisscross the tiles like the handwriting of a friend who never wastes ink. Somewhere, faintly, you hear a hand drum and a soft flute negotiating a pace. They settle on walking speed. Dionysus smiles the kind of smile that forgives without announcing it has forgiven. He tips the crater toward the fire in a brief libation no one needs to describe. The flame accepts and does not grow taller, it grows kinder. When you set your cup down, the night has not changed its color, but it has changed its weight. You are not lighter, you are carried more evenly. This, the crater says, by being a bowl and not a cup, is how we begin, by mixing what is heavy with what is clear. And for the first time in days, your body agrees that sleep is something you can enter without abandoning yourself.
Beyond the courtyard, a low stair curls toward a hollow in the hillside. Stone benches rise in soft arcs, as if the earth had learned the shape of listening. You recognize the place without needing a name. A theater that remembers voices even when no one speaks. Tonight, the voices choose to rest. A row of masks sleeps upon a shelf. One sorrow, one laughter, several for the in-betweens. Dionysus walks with you to the edge of the orchestra and lets the night try its acoustics.
Instead of a chorus, you hear crickets practicing unanimity. Instead of an actor, a breeze enters and exits, taking direction well. He sits at the first bench, pats the space beside him. Here, his silence says, we learned what happens when a city breathes together. You picture spring processions threading streets toward a sanctuary, hymn songs that once swelled into dithyrambs, wild at the edges, ordered at the heart. Out of such songs, dramas were born, masks to hold feeling without burning it, stories to carry heat without scolding hands. People sat where you sit and watched gods made human, and humans made more true by being watched with care. Dionysus lifts a mask of grief and sets it gently in your lap. It is lighter than it looks. Try it, the mask suggests, but do not wear it long. You raise it to your face, and your breath returns from the stone with a tone you recognize from your hardest days. Then he replaces it with the mask of laughter, not as denial, but as measure. The laughter does not shriek, it rounds the edges, reintroduces the room to oxygen. You understand then why the benches hold so many people at once, because no single chest can do all the breathing needed for a night. Somewhere above, the Acropolis would be a crown if you could see it. You remember hearing that plays were offered in honor of this god, that crowds gathered in spring to see new work walk into being, that a city judged and forgave itself in the same afternoon. Judges were chosen, prizes given, but prizes were never the point. The point was that pain and joy found forms sturdy enough to be shared. On the shelf, one mask has no mouth. You lift it and find that it listens for you. The mouthless mask teaches a trick, how to let another voice cross your stage without occupying your throat. You try it for a minute and feel the night relax around your ribs. Not all burdens ask to be narrated. Some ask to be housed until they cool. Dionysus takes the mouthless mask and sets it beside the others as if returning a sleeping child. He shows you how the wooden skein at the back could be painted to suggest palaces or huts, how a single door can mean many households, how a blank space can become a sea if the chorus decides to move like waves. You have never felt more tender toward craft. You have never felt safer in a room with so much pretending. Before you go, he unties a narrow ribbon from his wrist and knots it to the shelf where the masks rest. Intermission, the knot says. The theater accepts the pause the way a field accepts fallow. In that collective holding back, you hear a promise. Tomorrow will have room for truth, because tonight allowed truth to sleep. You leave without clapping. The benches keep your warmth a while and then let it go. The hill breathes as one body. Dionysus leads you back toward the ivy and the crater, and you realize that moderation and theater are cousins. Both are arts of proportion. Both trust that what is shared becomes lighter.
Back in the courtyard, the fire has settled into the confidence of coals. Dionysus sits cross-legged and unwinds his vine crown. He sifts the leaves with a patience you've come to trust, as if each had a story it could tell if asked kindly. "One of these is for you," the crown seems to whisper, though you have not said what for. He asks for nothing aloud. Instead, he waits the way a harbor waits, arms open, but not insisting ships come home. You realize you carry something that has outstayed its usefulness, a thought that circles the same stone, an old wanting that has forgotten how to want well. You place it unwrapped in the night air between you. The air does not recoil, it receives, and in receiving, it changes nothing about you except the pressure of the thing you've set down. Dionysus lifts a single leaf. Unlike the others, it holds a steady green, with a sheen quietly its own. He places it in your palm, leaf vein to lifeline. The touch is cool at first, then warm as if the leaf remembers sunlight and decides to lend you a little. "This one does not wither," the night says through him. "It waits for a letting go worthy of being kept." You have heard a tale of a crown that became stars because someone loved someone well and was not abandoned. A garland thrown into a sky that knew how to keep promises. The leaf in your hand is not a star. It is the kind of proof mortals are allowed, something you can lose and find again if you remember where you last felt honest. Dionysus stands and taps the thyrsus once against the flagstones. The sound is not command, it is punctuation. He walks you to the crater and adds a breath of water to what remains. For the road between now and sleep, the addition suggests. You drink, and the blend says what all good companions say near the end of an evening. Enough for tonight, more tomorrow if needed. He guides your gaze toward the gate. Beyond it, the mountain's path is lit by that modest moonlight that keeps feet safe, without waking the whole world. You tuck the leaf behind your ear and feel ridiculous for a blessed second, like a child's joy has outrun self-consciousness. The second is long enough to reset several hours of your life. Before you step away, Dionysus lifts a small amphora painted with a scene you almost know. Figures dancing, a vine threading their ankles into companionship. He tilts it slightly, and a scent rises that is less grape than memory of harvest. Baskets, sun-warmed shoulders, the relief of shade. Not all rites must be loud. Some are kept by sleeping well, the amphora breathes. You think of processions that once shook cities, of drums that taught feet permission. You think too of mornings after, when streets were swept and songs turned into bread for the day. The god in front of you contains both, the dance and the table, the ecstatic and the exact. Tonight, he favors the exact, not to deny the dance, but to preserve it for when you can bear joy without breaking. The leaf at your ear does not fade in the corner of your sight. You are not bound to keep it forever. You are invited to keep it until the next honest letting go. It is a quiet covenant between your hand and your breath, that what you release will return in better shape or not return at all. When you finally turn toward the path, Dionysus does not bless you with gesture or words. He simply removes the thorn you had learned to tolerate and sets it where thorns go when they retire. In the earth, under ivy, to do no more harm. The courtyard rests. The crater cools. The staff leans. Somewhere in the near distance, a night bird edits its song down to the note that matters. You walk. The mountain accepts your weight as if it had been remembering your step all evening. The leaf at your ear listens to the dark and stays green.
You reach the edge of the mountain, where land thins into a promontory, a finger of rock pointing into sleep. The sea below is the color of thought after a long day, dark with places of silver where the moon practices handwriting. Columns rise on the headland, pale and patient, stone remembering salt. You do not need anyone to name the temple. The wind names it each time it curves around the pillars, a place that has kept watch over sailors and storms long enough to be their relative. You sit among the fallen drums and fluted fragments, and your breath changes. There is a rhythm here, 4 in, 4 out, that the sea invented before lungs learned it. Somewhere far down the cliff, a rope knocks a mast with the slow regularity of an old story. You remember a name for the one who rules these waters? Poseidon, bearer of the trident, the earth shaker, the one who taught the ground itself to move like a stern father tapping his foot. But tonight he shakes nothing. Tonight he steadies. The tide is kind. It lifts the shore 1 quiet inch, then sets it back as if to show you how to carry weight without clutching. You watch a gull hang on an invisible thread, adjusting the angle of its wings to a preference the wind discovers for it. A thought opens. Maybe endurance is not stiffness, but the conversation between pressure and release. Footsteps you do not hear become presence. He is here the way weather is here, felt before seen, understood before defined. Poseidon does not stride from the foam. He sits beside you as if this were his threshold, as if you had been expected. The trident leans against a block of marble, 3 points dim as stars behind haze. In his beard, night gathers the way seaweed collects shells, tenderly and by accident. He places something in your palm, a small anchor made of lead-soft metal, no larger than a grape. It is cool, then it warms. You expect weight, command, the instruction to hold fast at all costs. Instead, he lifts your hand and lets the anchor dangle from a thread of sea silk you cannot quite see. It does not drop, it settles. Not a bite into the seabed, more a conversation with it. Soft anchor, the cliff translates. What you tie tonight is not your ship, but your fear. The sea makes its case with examples. A swell lifts. You loosen your fingers. The anchor yields a hand's breadth and then finds a new hold, gentler, surer. Another swell, another adjustment. You begin to feel foolish for the years you demanded certainty from waters built for motion. Poseidon looks at you with a kindness old as tides. The kindness says, you were not wrong to ask for a harbor. You were only early to anchor so hard that the rope forgot to sing. Across the water, a line of foam writes and erases itself at an even pace. You remember a different story, how a city chose its guardian by gifts, the salt spring surging from a struck rock, while an olive tree unfolded its future patience. You do not judge the contest tonight. You only understand that the spring, though briny, is also a promise. Some waters are meant to remind, not to drink, and the olive, though slow, becomes a lamp. Between them, a coastline learns to be a home. Poseidon's hand, knuckled like surf-worn stone, turns your wrist. He shows you how to tie the sea silk not into a knot, but into a loop that can widen under strain and tighten under slack. The loop looks like a question mark agreeing to rest. You let the anchor swing once. It answers by not arguing with gravity. Beneath the temple, the dark shifts with the patience of herds. You remember another epithet, Hippios, lord of horses, how the wave-maned creatures were said to be his to harness. In the shine beneath the cliff, swells look briefly like the backs of horses at pasture, breathing together.
Your heart, long a nervous colt, steps closer to their rhythm. By the time the moon climbs a second thumb's height, you have learned the small lesson that feels like a large one. To anchor softly is still to be held. When Poseidon leaves, he does not leave prints. The marble remembers him by how calmly it cools. You rise without hurry. The anchor weighs nearly nothing. The night weighs even less.
The path curls down toward a cove where the sea gathers itself before deciding on directions. Pebbles click under your feet, a language that needs no mouth. In the bowl of the cove, water sketches maps and then washes them clean, teaching you how not to hoard instruction. Poseidon meets you again without ceremony, as if every shoreline were an antechamber to his patience. He lifts the trident and sets its prongs into wet sand. The sound is less puncture than punctuation. 3, the shore says, as though you had asked. He points to the first tooth. The tide lifts around it in a shoulder. Drift, the water explains. Let your boat, mind, body, promise, find the current that wants it, not the current you think proves something. You watch the pull take a cluster of foam and move it with such effortless accuracy that you ache for all the years you rode against that kind of help. He gestures to the second tooth. The tide eddies, a small cathedral of spirals. It says, more, not forever, not as verdict, enough to sleep, enough to let repair outpace rumor. In the eddy's eye, a pale seahorse appears and disappears between breaths, as if shy of being called real. Its tiny head turns toward you, not for orders, but for notice. You have the sense that it will lead only those whose heartbeat has learned to match the water's lowered voice. The third tooth takes the smallest wave and makes a runway of it. Depart, the wave suggests, with courtesy. Push off with the tide, not against it. You think, for a startled second, of horses again, how hoofs choose the firm line of a beach at dawn, how a rider who respects the animal rides farther by asking less. Somewhere inland, old tracks remember festivals at an isthmus where people raced and wrestled for a god who loved both strength and its restraint. The story does not need its dates tonight. It holds the shape of effort that knows its own measure. While you and the trident learn each other's tempos, the cove lends you a mirror without edges. You see the day standing behind you like a team of creatures still wearing their harnesses. Poseidon, Hippios again, undoes the straps in your mind. One by one, the beasts bow their heads and walk into pasture. The smallest lingers. He rubs the soft place between its eyes with a knuckle the sea has taught to be gentle. It follows. A tremor moves through the stone under your feet. Not fear, not danger, a reminder. If the sea belongs to him, so does the quiver in the earth. Enosioigus has not forgotten his other name. You recall that sailors used to read such tremors as omens, that cities once carved his likeness into coins so that trade could carry a little of his steadiness. The knowledge arrives like a tide that has learned discretion. It does not overwhelm. Poseidon lifts the trident from the sand. The 3 teeth shine like 3 stages of a night done well. The hour you let yourself loosen, the hour you let yourself hold, the hour you let yourself go. He places the staff in your hands just long enough for your bones to learn its weight.
then takes it back without taking anything from you. You do not need a weapon tonight. You need a promise. The promise sounds like pebbles turning in small waves. On the far side of the cove, a narrow path climbs toward lights you cannot yet see. The seahorse appears once more, this time closer, bright as a fingernail of moon in your palm. It does not ask you to follow. It swims in place until your heart remembers the slower beat and then glides ahead. When you step forward, the water lifts your ankle as if blessing the first stride. By the time you reach the curve where the cove can no longer see you, the trident's lesson arranges itself into a sentence you can carry. Drift enough to find, more enough to mend, depart enough to live. Behind you, the sea keeps speaking in a grammar that erases footprints as kindly as it makes them.
The path rises from the cove until the sea sounds like breath taken from farther away, still yours, just larger. You carry the soft anchor in one pocket and the memory of 3 tides in your pulse. Drift, moor, depart. When the stones begin to glimmer with a mist of salt, you know you have come to a ledge the wind prefers. It smells of rope, pitch, and old offerings. Somewhere, generations ago, a sailor placed a small bronze on a flat rock and asked for fair passage. The rock kept the request, the water kept the answer. In the perch of a split boulder, light gathers though there is no flame. It is thin at first, the color of shy moon on scales. Then you see him, the seahorse again, nearer than thought, as if curiosity had grown a lantern. It is no larger than a thumb, yet its posture holds a certain dignity, the way a herald stands who knows the message will arrive even if he whispers it. The creature curls its tail around a thread of sea silk that seems to stitch the air to the night. You do not reach to touch it. You let your gaze learn its rhythm. The lantern brightens when your heartbeat slows, dims when you clutch. You experiment, one breath too tight, one breath aloud. The lantern tells the truth without scolding, and the truth is simple. You are safest when you are not braced against everything. A low thunder moves through the stone under your soles, not a warning, but a reminder of a god's other hand, the earthshaker who taught cities to respect the undernote of ground. You remember how markets once stamped his head upon coins, how athletes ran and wrestled by an isthmus to honor a lord who yoked horses and waves alike. Even here at night, the world carries that memory like a tendon, quiet, tensile, reliable. The seahorse begins to drift along the ledge, and you follow. Where it pauses, a small compass appears in the foam, a rosette no hand has drawn, made of eddies arranging themselves into petals. The needle is a sliver of darker sheen that keeps pointing, not north, but toward whatever distance your nerves can bear without borrowing fear. The lantern explains nothing, it only makes conditions under which you can understand. You look seaward and imagine hulls with eyes painted at their prows, galleys that learn to read the ribs of waves like script. In your ear you hear oars enter and leave water together, the consent that keeps a city's stories afloat. Before long, the lantern rests at the ledge's lip and brightens once more. You realize the lesson is ready to be performed. You take out the soft anchor and the loop of sea silk. Around a cleft in the rock, you tie the question mark knot Poseidon showed you. You don't pull to test it, you lean into it and feel how it answers weight with welcome. On the other end, invisible, the anchor finds the seabed of your thoughts and asks nothing but honesty. For a moment, the whole night is a harbor. The seahorse turns slightly, the way a lamp turns toward a page. You give yourself a vow you can keep, to sleep as if the tide were on your side. You spill a mouthful of water from your flask, libation to the quiet, then sit with your back to the stone. The lantern hums to a smaller glow, one that lives under eyelids. Foam builds a little grammar at your feet. Now, soon, later. All 3 words are kind. Behind your eyes, bright fragments settle. The salt spring is allowed to be a reminder and not a thirst. The olive is allowed to be patient without apology. The horses run at a pace that refuses spectacle and discovers distance. And the 3 teeth of the trident keep their assignments without your surveillance. If a lighthouse ever stood nearby, its beam is not needed now. The seahorse is enough. It teaches by being bright where you soften, by dimming where you force. When you finally lie down, you do not chase sleep, you moor to it. The anchor yields and holds until the words inside your body become water motions, and water motions become the oldest lullaby on earth. Sometime between late and early, you wait just enough to find the lantern perched upon the knot, resting like a star that chose detail over distance. You smile, without teeth, without effort, and sleep folds over you again, sealing the night with a patient seam. At first light, the ledge is only a ledge. The lantern is gone. In your palm, the soft anchor is warm. On the knot, a tiny curl of seaweed has arranged itself into a wreath no bigger than a ring. You untie the loop and feel nothing tighten in protest. The sea takes back the lesson as kindly as it gave it and leaves you with what remains, a heart that can travel without hurrying, a promise that can hold without gripping, a shore that will meet you halfway.
The path up the mountain remembers you. Stones that once tested your steps now make room for them, as if the night had sent a quiet letter ahead to announce your return. The air cools the way a thought cools when it finally finds its word. Above, the crown of Olympus holds a hush that feels ceremonial rather than empty. A hush that knows what it is about to receive. Zeus is there before you can consider where to look. He is not enthroned in thunder. He stands near the temple's eastern edge, where the marble grows pale as bone just before light. The cedar chest rests at his side, the one you have learned to love for what it contains when closed. He lifts his gaze to the far rim of the world, where darkness loosens its knot, thread by thread. You sit on the step where sleep taught you to lean. The sky performs its oldest art, unbluing. At the horizon, a soft bloom of saffron announces a traveler who keeps the earliest hours. You do not name her. You simply feel the footfall of dawn, the way fields must feel it, the way a hull of a ship feels wind before sailcloth lifts. Somewhere in you lives an old knowledge that offerings were once made at this hour, that many temples look east so that stone can learn the habit of expecting light. Zeus does not hurry the moment. He opens his hands, palms up, as if weighing 2 invisible objects, night's rest and day's work, and finding them equal. 3 breaths, the marble says for him. You take the first in slowly, letting it reach the place where Athena taught your map to keep only necessary roads. You release it without accounting. The second you let refill the hinge Hephaestus set, The door opens and closes without complaint. The third, you draw through laurel and ivy memories until it exits with the politeness Artemis used to train the wind. Somewhere, a lyre you cannot hear approves with a string that is not willing to sound unless you forgive yourself. You manage it. The string consents. Light gathers into a presence rather than a glare. The first birds speak like careful priests, syllables instead of songs. Zeus looks toward the eastern slope, and for an instant the sky is a corridor, and you, a guest. He is Zeus Xenios again, the guardian of the welcome that feels like home and not like debt. You are offered the day with the manners of a host who knows when to step back. There is, right before the sun decides, a minute that does not yet belong to morning and no longer belongs to night. You feel it arrive and settle like a hand on your head, a blessing that is also an invitation. In that minute, choices wait without tapping their feet. The world holds still enough for a promise to hear itself. Zeus gestures toward the horizon, not as command, as permission. You let a sentence form, small enough to keep. I will move at the pace of keeping, not conquering. From the valley, a faint bell accepts the idea of day. Smoke begins in smaller houses with the confidence of those who have lit fires many times. You think of Eos stepping through her own threshold, her rosy garments brushed by sky. But here at Olympus, the right to open the day is shared. The goddess arrives, the god allows, the mountain remembers how to be a table. You look at Zeus in the way he is present without performance. The thunderbolt remains in the chest. The lid is closed not as restraint, but as liturgy. The decision to keep power folded is the first rite of the morning. In that restraint, you learn that beginnings are safest when they are also returns. The minute ends without ending you. The sun clears the line like a patient trireme leaving harbor. You do not cheer. You agree.
Zeus kneels, an action that surprises you only because you have not seen it before. He draws the cedar chest a little closer and rests both hands upon the lid as if greeting an old friend after a shared silence. The scent lifts, pine, faint cinnamon, the memory of yesterday's restraint. You realize that reverence can be as simple as not reaching too soon. He unlatches the leather strap without opening the chest. The gesture is more promise than access, the way a musician loosens the case but leaves the instrument sleeping. You have been taught by stories that Cyclopes made this thunder for him, that mountains have learned the taste of that fire. Yet this morning the fire remains folded like a festival garment between seasons. Its power is not in the strike, but in the consent to wait. Not every bright thing wants to be used, the threshold says. Zeus nods, and the nod carries centuries of mornings when storms were the right answer and others when they weren't. He turns so that the sun can touch the chest. Light slips over the lid like oil laid carefully upon a new hinge. The temple stones warm by degrees, and your chest mirrors them. He lifts the lid the width of a breath. Inside, the ribbon of lightning gleams, pale as ash made holy. It lifts its head like a snake that remembers it is also a river, then settles again, content to be a possibility. Zeus lowers the lid and fastens the strap. Nothing in the world argues.
You remember, as if someone had pressed a seal into wax inside your memory, that dawn sacrifices were common, that oaths spoken in first light were thought truer because they were witnessed by a day that had no blemish yet. Zeus Horkios, guardian of oaths, is present in the way his hands leave the strap aligned, not too tight, not lax, the exactness of someone who understands that keeping is a craft. He looks at you then, and the look asks whether you have your own thunder kept properly, the words you could throw, the judgments you could hurl, the brilliance you could force into midday glare. You think of the theater where masks learned to rest, of the forge where burrs learned to round, of a lyre's seventh string that only sings when ledger pages close. Your mouth softens, the morning approves. Zeus reaches into a pocket of his cloak and brings out a thin cord of cloud spun so fine it looks like breath made visible. He ties it around your wrist once, twice, and cinches it with a knot that can remember how to loosen. For daylight, the cord implies. It will not pull you, it will remind you, the way a bookmark reminds a reader that pages may be loved without being devoured. From the terrace, you can see paths switch back down the mountain toward fields, toward markets, toward the kind of hours that pretend to be ordinary and are actually the rarest kind. Zeus lowers his hand and places his palm on the stone step. You mirror him. Heat passes through the marble into your skin, a small covenant with matter. We will treat each other kindly today. He does not speak a benediction. He arranges the space for one, the chest at his right, the open east before him, the minimal tools of morning in reach, breath, chord, silence. If thunder is needed, thunder will know it. If not, the bright thing will remain folded, a luminous citizenship rather than a weapon. You stand with him until the sun finds the temple fully. Birds escalate from syllables to actual songs. A shepherd somewhere begins to persuade hooves into order. The world offers you the degree of clarity that does not sting the eyes. You accept it the way a harbor accepts a tide, by making room, not declarations. When you step back, the thunderbolt unused does not feel like denial. It feels like art.
It is time to leave without leaving. Zeus leads you to the temple's threshold, where the shadow still stretches long enough to walk in. He lifts from a hook a folded square of cloud, the same fabric that warmed you on the night he made a hearth of vapor. He shakes it once, it remembers softness. He places it in your hands. This is for closing, the gesture says, when night returns. You tuck the cloud cloth into your satchel, light as a promise kept. Around you, Olympus begins the busy quiet of morning. Attendants who never hurry and are never late. A spring that writes small silver sentences over stone. A spider resuming a thread it sensibly paused. If there is a law here, it is the law of continuities. Zeus touches the space above your brow, the way he did not touch it the first night. Permission, not pressure. Keep three things, the hills seem to translate. A breath, a small vow, a chair for silence.
You think of Hera's knot that knows how to give, of Dionysus's crater that teaches edges to be kind, of Apollo and Artemis agreeing about the shore. You think of Hephaestus's gentle hammer. You think of maps that edit themselves when morning arrives. You realize that all these gifts are not separate. They are the same lesson spoken in dialects. You look east once more. The light is now ordinary, which is to say, miraculous without news. Somewhere, fields accept the yoke that does not bruise. Somewhere, market stalls lift their shutters as if opening eyelids. The gods you met last night remain where you left them because they are also where you are. It is the paradox that makes travel worth the time. Zeus reaches for a shallow cup and tips a measure of water on the step. The libation is so small you might miss it if you were learning grandeur instead of gratitude. The stone darkens the marble and evaporates into a permission slip. You repeat the motion with your own flask. The stone remembers both gestures together, as if hospitality had two hands. Before you go, Zeus takes from a niche a small jar crowned with a ribbon of painted ivy. He sets it in your palm, a household god in miniature, guard of stores, friend of continuance. You have heard that some families kept such jars near the door so that leaving and returning would not be acts of chance. You feel the jar's weight, hardly any. Yet when you imagine placing it on a shelf at home, your walls acquire a new patience. Beware of trying to own the day, the wind warns kindly. It is better when borrowed. You nod. You can borrow what you are willing to return. At dusk, you will lay the cloud cloth across your knees, light the ember clock within your ribs, and note how the seventh string behaves. You will trace the treaty in sand without needing sand. You will tie the ribbon of wind when needed and loosen it when not. You will anchor softly before sleep. Each act a way of handing the day back with its corners unbent. Zeus, who has not once raised his voice, raises the morning by standing still. You thank him in the currency he prefers, a smaller promise than pride would choose, a truer promise than fear would allow. He answers by setting the cedar chest's latch with a click that sounds like noon agreeing to arrive. On the first step down, you look back. For a heartbeat, the temple seems to lean closer, like a father who listens with his whole face. You do not wave, you carry. The path narrows, then widens, then becomes the kind of road that looks like any other until someone asks where you learned to walk this calmly. By the time the trees take you in, the day already feels used in the best sense, ready for what it was made for. The minute with no owner will come again tomorrow. You will not chase it. You will meet it where it lives, at the edge of breath, in Zeus's hands, in your own.